By the first days of October 1777, the British stopped thinking of the Delaware River defenses as an irritating problem on a map. These weren't lines and symbols anymore. They were a choke collar around Philadelphia, tightening every day the British Army sat in the city and still couldn't reliably feed itself. This is Insights into History, Season 1, Episode 7, Delaware Defenders Part 2, and the story turns on a simple, brutal truth. If the British couldn't open the river, Philadelphia could become a trap. So the river had to be forced open, fort by fort, obstacle by obstacle, and the first link in that chain to give way was Fort Billingsport. On October 2nd, 1777, Billingsport falls quickly, not because its people were cowards, not because they didn't understand what was at stake, but because some positions just aren't built to take a real punch. Billingsport was undergunned, with only a handful of cannon. It was undermanned, too. Desertions had reduced the garrison to roughly a little over 100 men. And when the British made their move, they did it with the kind of practicality that wins campaigns. They came in below the fort and hit it from the rear, from the direction the defenses weren't designed to face. Multiple accounts describe Colonel Thomas Sterling leading the attacking force with the 42nd Regiment, the Black Watch, and elements of the 71st, among others. However you slice the order of battle, the result for the defenders was the same. They were about to be swallowed. The American commander at Billingsport was Colonel William Bradford. Bradford is one of those Revolutionary-era figures who sits at the crossroads of war and public life. An officer, yes, but also a well-known Philadelphia printer connected to the revolutionary print culture that shaped how people understood the war around them. And he makes the kind of decision that doesn't sound heroic in the moment, but matters in the long run. Bradford doesn't try to turn Billingsport into a last stand. He chooses denial over sacrifice. He spikes the cannon, burns what needs to be burned, and gets his men out. The British can take the ground, but they won't get a ready-made fort they can immediately use. Now, if you're the British command, that's still progress. Because the moment Billingsport is neutralized, the river work begins. British engineers and sailors move straight to the dangerous centerpiece of the American plan, the Cheval de Frise. These are underwater barriers, studded with spikes, positioned to tear into hulls and trap ships where shore batteries can punish them. Royal Navy crews begin cutting channels to the first two lines. And clearing those obstacles doesn't magically unlock the Delaware like a door swinging open, but it changes the situation. The river goes from impossible to contested, and contested means the British can escalate. So the focus narrows sharply to the two positions that actually decide the river's fate: Fort Mercer on the New Jersey side at Red Bank and Fort Mifflin on Mud Island. General Howe's idea is straightforward. Even if it's not gentle, hit Mercer by land. Smash Mifflin with combined fire from ship and shore. The first bombardment of Fort Mifflin comes on October 11th. Think of it less as a main event and more as a test, a probing attack, the kind of pressure that tells you what you're up against. And what the British learn is simple. If they want Mud Island, they'll need heavier batteries, and they'll need time to apply them. While the British are testing Mifflin, they open the land campaign against Mercer. And this is where we meet Colonel Carl von Donop. Von Donop leads about 2,000 Hessians into New Jersey. These are German auxiliaries serving with British forces. Experienced soldiers who have fought in Europe and believe they know exactly what a small fort can withstand. Von Donop stages around Haddonfield, and in repeated retellings he speaks as if this will be quick business. The kind of talk you hear right before something goes terribly wrong. He reportedly intends to take Fort Mercer before sunset. Confidence can be contagious. It can also be fatal. Von Donop approaches the fort carefully at first. He reconnoiters. He brings up smaller artillery, field pieces and howitzers, and puts them in range. Then he organizes the assault itself. Roughly 1,200 men, split into two thrusts designed to wrap around the position. Inside Fort Mercer, the defenders aren't a grand army in perfect formation. The Corps is the 1st and 2nd Rhode Island Regiments, under Colonel Christopher Green and Colonel Israel Angel. They're worn down by the campaign, under strength and outnumbered, but they have what matters most in this kind of fight: earthworks, improvements, and obstacles laid out to break an attack before it can find its footing. And it's worth noting something that's often treated as an aside, even though it shouldn't be. Rhode Island's units at this time included a notable number of black soldiers, especially compared to many other continental formations. The exact proportions shift depending on the source and the moment, but the essential point holds. Black soldiers are there in line in the fort, in the smoke, fighting the same fight, absorbing the same danger. Before the Hessians storm in, von Donop sends a demand to surrender. The ultimatum carried an ugly edge. With the threat that if the defenders fought, no quarter would be given. Greene's response becomes one of those lines that survives because it captures the mood of the whole moment. He replies, in effect, "We're not asking for mercy, and you're not getting any from us either. We ask no quarter, nor will we give any." And with that, the battlefield stops being hypothetical. The Hessians advance with equipment meant for assault work. They carry fascines, bundled brush designed to fill ditches, and smooth rough ground for storming parties. It's organized, it's aggressive, and then they collide with the first engineered problem, abatis. Abatis looks simple until you're trying to cross it under fire. It's felled trees, tangled and locked together, with sharpened branches angled outward. It doesn't necessarily stop an army forever. That's not its job. Its job is to slow you down and break your rhythm, to force you to bunch up, to make you spend precious seconds hacking and dragging while musket fire and cannon shot chew into you. The Hessians cut at it while the defenders fire from behind their works. Then the attackers find what seems like a promising opening, and they surge toward it. And that's when the fort's design springs a trap. What looks like a path becomes a pocket, a cramped space with limited exits, a place where men are packed tight and can't maneuver. At close range, the Rhode Islanders unleash volleys and grape shot into bodies pressed together. Von Donop goes down mortally wounded. The momentum breaks. There's another hard tactical detail that shows up in several accounts. Taking a fortified position isn't just about courage. You need tools, scaling ladders, equipment to cross and climb under fire, the means to turn a brief foothold into control of the wall. Multiple sources emphasize that the attackers didn't have what they needed to capitalize, even if parts of the attack reached the works. The result is shocking in its speed. In under an hour, the assault is finished. The Hessians fall back, first in confusion, then with what order they can salvage, dragging the wounded toward cover. Evening comes on. Survivors retreat toward Haddonfield. After the firing stops, something else begins, the grim work of treating shattered bodies. Nearby, the Whittle property appears again and again in the historical record as a place where wounded men, American and Hessian alike, are carried for care. Von Donop is among those brought in from the field. He does not recover. He's buried near the very fort he had expected to capture and rename. Fort Mercer is still standing. The Hessian losses are devastating. Many sources place them near half the attacking force. American losses are comparatively light. Later, Hessian officers criticize pieces of the plan. The loss is surprise, splitting the attack, underestimating the defenses. But all the analysis in the world can't erase the central lesson. If you try to muscle your way into a fortified redoubt where the ground itself has been built to trap you, you can bleed out fast. And even if Howe tries to keep a professional tone in his reports, the practical situation doesn't change. Philadelphia is still hungry. The river is not open. And Fort Mercer has just demonstrated it can turn a confident assault into a disaster. So attention swings back to the other target, the one that can be reduced by weight of metal alone, Fort Mifflin. Mifflin's garrison, at least at first, is a patchwork. Militia, men not fully trained on the guns. Troops considered unfit for long field campaigning. Washington understands exactly what's coming. So he reinforces the fort. Early on, the defense is closely associated with Lieutenant Colonel Samuel Smith. Later, Major Simeon Thayer becomes central, overseeing the final stage in the evacuation. Washington's logic is painfully clear. Don't think of this as holding a point on a map. Think of it as buying hours, days, weeks. In this fight, time is a weapon. The British begin building serious land batteries on nearby islands and along the banks, stacking guns into positions that create crossing, converging angles of fire on Mud Island. And when the British effort finally fully aligns, with naval guns in the river and heavy artillery ashore working together, the siege becomes one of the most intense bombardments of the Philadelphia campaign. Multiple summaries point to the moment the hammer truly drops. around November 10th, when the British have finally massed enough artillery to do what probing fire couldn't. From there, it's not just an attack, it's demolition. Inside the fort, the defenders do what defenders always do when the walls are coming apart in daylight. They rebuild at night. They patch parapets, shift guns, improvise protections, and step over rubble that used to be a functioning fort. But eventually, physics wins. The arithmetic of iron and stone catches up with bravery. Samuel Smith is wounded and evacuated. Command passes to Thayer. And in the middle of the destruction comes a moment that's strangely human, almost surreal. At one point, the American flag is lowered briefly. Some accounts describe it as a signal. The British see it and cheer, believing surrender has finally arrived. But then the flag rises again. It goes back up over a fort that's already half-wrecked, and it stays there, not because it can stop cannonballs, but because it can still say, plainly, we're not done yet. The British don't get through this without pain, either, especially on the river. The broader contest of the Delaware includes the destruction or loss of British ships, notably HMS Augusta and HMS Merlin. Meanwhile, American naval support under Commodore John Hazelwood becomes increasingly impossible to sustain under the growing British pressure. In the end, multiple accounts note the American river flotilla is scuttled, destroyed so it can't be taken and used against the very cause it was built to support. Eventually, Fort Mifflin reaches a point where holding it isn't defense anymore. It's just dying in place. Thayer makes a professional call. With the fort smashed beyond meaningful protection and continued resistance offering little tactical value, he evacuates. In mid-November 1777, on the night before British troops take possession, the survivors row across to New Jersey, and they leave the flag flying. When British Marines arrive the morning of November 16th, they haul it down. But what they've captured isn't a proud fortress taken in a dramatic storming. It's wreckage. Fort Mifflin isn't conquered by a rush at the walls. It's broken by sustained force. And that broken fort accomplishes what Washington needed most. It buys time. Now look at the situation after Mifflin. Billingsport is gone. Mud Island is ruined and abandoned. Hazelwood's flotilla is effectively neutralized. River obstacles are increasingly bypassed. That means Fort Mercer, even after its dramatic victory at Red Bank, is starting to look less like a shield and more like a trap for the men inside it. Mercer's mission was never die heroically for its own sake. It was to keep the Delaware denied for as long as possible. And by late November, as long as possible has arrived. Accounts commonly place Mercer's evacuation around November 20th or 21. The garrison pulls out. Guns that can't be moved are spiked. The fort is abandoned in the same spirit as Billingsport. Deny the enemy a usable prize. And with that, the Delaware River defenses collapse. Philadelphia's supply line reopens. The British settle into winter quarters with far less fear of starvation. And the Continental Army withdraws to face a winter that will remake it in ways no one fully understands yet. Valley Forge. But if there's a last word to leave you with, it's this. The Delaware River forts don't deliver some clean, triumphant victory that ends a story. They deliver something that can matter even more than a win in a single battle. They deliver time. Time for Washington's army to survive the campaign season. Time for the revolution to stay alive long enough for the war to widen. Time for the next phase, the one that will soon include open French alliance and a conflict that stretches far beyond America's shores. These aren't always the first battlefield names people learn, but they are names worth remembering, because they are the forts that helped save the revolution. That's it for this episode of Insights into History. Check back next week when we take a look at the Indian King Tavern. If you have feedback, suggestions, or a story you think deserves a deeper look, email me at comments@insightsintothings.com. Again, that's comments@insightsintothings.com. Or give us a call at 856-403-8788. That's 856-403-8788. Leave a voice message, and we may even include it in a future show if you'd like. Again, that number is 856-403-8788.